In the early 1990s, Porsche was on the brink of collapse. Sales had plummeted from 58,000 cars to just 14,000. Losses had reached 239 million Deutsche Marks, and many believed the legendary sports car maker wouldn't survive as an independent company. The brand that created the iconic 911 was facing extinction, yet against all odds, its dramatic turnaround began with an unexpected combination: a phone call, a Japanese consultant, and a circular saw. This is that story. To understand how Porsche ended up at the edge of a cliff, you have to go back to the 1980s, because the seeds of the crisis were planted during a period of extraordinary success, and that is almost always how these things happen. In 1986, Porsche sold 58,625 cars. That number is important. It was the highest annual volume in the company's history, and it represented the peak of a boom that had been building for years. The American market was gorging on Porsches. Wall Street bonuses in the mid-80s were transforming the cultural meaning of the 911. It wasn't just a sports car anymore. It was a symbol. A 928 in the driveway meant something. A 944 Turbo told people who you were before you opened your mouth. By the early 1990s, Porsche was stretched thin across three distinct model lines: the 911, the 928, and the 944. Each demanded significant investment in engineering, production, and support. When a recession hit the luxury car market, American demand collapsed. A weaker dollar made Porsches more expensive in the United States, and consumer attitudes shifted away from flashy spending. As a result, sales plunged from nearly 59,000 cars to just 14,000, while Porsche's high operating costs remained unchanged, pushing the company toward a financial crisis. By 1992, Porsche was losing 239 million Deutsche Marks, a crisis that threatened the company's survival. The problem wasn't just falling sales. Its manufacturing system was painfully inefficient. Factories were cluttered with massive inventories, workers spent valuable time searching for parts, and quality issues were often discovered only after cars were fully assembled, leading to costly rework. The entire operation was draining cash and tying up resources. In the midst of this turmoil, Porsche appointed 40-year-old engineer Wendelin Wiedeking as CEO in 1993. Many viewed him as a temporary caretaker, expected to oversee the company's decline or eventual sale, unaware that he would soon lead one of the greatest turnarounds in automotive history. They were wrong. Wiedeking's first move was not conventional. He did not bring in management consultants. He did not commission a comprehensive strategic review. He did not call an all-company meeting to discuss the future and align on shared values. He made a phone call to Japan. In 1987, a group of engineers who had spent their careers at Toyota studying, refining, and implementing the manufacturing philosophy developed by Taiichi Ohno had set up an independent consultancy. Its name was Shinjijutsu Global Consulting. Its principals were Yoshiki Iwata, Chihiro Nakao, and Akira Takenawa. They were lean manufacturing specialists of the highest possible order, deeply schooled in the Toyota production system, the most sophisticated and influential approach to industrial efficiency that the 20th century had produced. Wiedeking flew them to Zuffenhausen. What followed became a legendary story in modern manufacturing. Consultant Chihiro Nakao entered Porsche's 911 production plant and immediately saw a chaotic system where workers wasted time navigating shelves instead of building cars. To make his point, he lay on the factory floor to observe everything from ground level, then bluntly declared that the factory looked more like a warehouse, with workers reduced to monkeys climbing shelves. He argued the real issue was the massive storage system, which trapped money in excess inventory and slowed production. His radical solution was simple: cut down the shelves and remove everything above 1.3 meters. Porsche CEO Wendelin Wiedeking took the saw himself and physically dismantled the system. Beyond the practical shift toward lean, just-in-time production, the act was symbolic. Leadership was visibly breaking the old system to force change. However, the workforce and unions resisted, questioning whether methods from Toyota could really work for a complex, high-precision brand like Porsche. Wiedeking held the line. He listened respectfully, and he held the line. And then, over the following 3 years, the numbers began to change. Assembly time per vehicle fell from 120 hours to 72. That is a 40% reduction in the time it took to build each car. Defects per vehicle, the faults that had to be corrected after the car was finished, were cut by approximately 50%. The average Porsche coming off the assembly line in 1995 had around 3 defects, not 30. 3. The moment that matters most in this story, the moment that genuinely deserves the weight of what happened, came on the 27th of July, 1994. On that day, a Porsche came off the assembly line at Zuffenhausen requiring no end-of-line rework whatsoever. Not one correction, not one repair. A finished car, ready to drive, ready to sell, requiring nothing further from anyone. A car that had passed through the entire production process without accumulating a single defect that needed addressing before it left the factory. The team stopped the line. People cried. The transformation at Porsche came with real human cost. Thousands of employees were laid off, and management was significantly reduced as the company fought to survive. While painful, these cuts helped stabilize Porsche and make it financially viable again. Wendelin Wiedeking then redefined the company's direction with a ruthless focus. Porsche would center entirely on the 911, supported by just one additional model. That car became the Boxster, a mid-engine roadster built using shared components that fit the new lean production system. It expanded Porsche's customer base without weakening the brand identity. The results were extraordinary. By the early 2000s, Porsche became the most profitable carmaker per vehicle in the world, with the 911 evolving into a highly efficient profit machine. Wiedeking rose to become one of Germany's highest-paid executives. But as with Porsche's history, success was not the end of the story. New challenges were already looming. In 2007 and 2008, Wiedeking pursued what has been described as one of the most audacious corporate takeover attempts in the history of the automotive industry. Using a complex structure of options and derivatives, Porsche's holding company accumulated a position in Volkswagen Group shares so large and so opaque that when it was finally disclosed, it triggered a short squeeze of spectacular proportions. For 2 days, in October 2008, Volkswagen briefly became the most valuable company in the world by market capitalization, not because of anything Volkswagen had done, but because hedge funds who had bet against the stock were scrambling to cover positions they could no longer sustain. Wiedeking's later financial strategy turned disastrous during the 2008 global crisis, when Porsche's massive debt of around 10 billion euros became unmanageable as credit markets collapsed. The move that was meant to strengthen the company instead pushed it toward insolvency, leading to his forced exit in 2009 amid controversy and a long-running, but ultimately dropped legal investigation. His story remains deeply paradoxical. He helped save Porsche through bold, hands-on industrial transformation, but later nearly brought it down through high-risk financial ambition. At its core, it is a story about real corporate change, driven not by theory or slogans, but by difficult decisions, uncomfortable truths, and the willingness to radically reshape an institution to survive. Porsche changed. The shelves came down. The defects disappeared. And the 911 is still being built in Zuffenhausen today, in a factory that is virtually unrecognizable from the warehouse it used to be. If that story surprised you, if the connection between Toyota's production philosophy and Porsche's survival is something you didn't know before today, then this channel exists for you. Subscribe, leave a comment below. Tell us whether you think Wiedeking deserved the 50 million after what he built, or whether what he nearly destroyed at the end changes the answer. And share this, because the people who think Porsche was always untouchable deserve to know the truth. There is one more dimension to this story that deserves its own space: the question of what the Porsche turnaround actually means for how we think about companies, cultures, and the relationship between the two. Wiedeking's lean manufacturing overhaul at Porsche wasn't just about efficiency, it was a full shift in mindset, inspired by Toyota. Instead of treating quality issues as something for a separate department to fix at the end, responsibility was pushed to every worker, with the authority to stop production if problems arose. This was a major cultural shock for a workforce used to the idea that production lines should never stop. But under lean thinking, stopping to fix small issues immediately was seen as more efficient than letting defects accumulate downstream. The transition was difficult, involving intense negotiations and significant job losses, but over time the system began to work. For those who remained, there was a growing sense of pride in building higher quality cars, culminating in milestones like a defect-free production run in 1994, proof of what the transformed Porsche could achieve. Wiedeking understood this. He understood that a turnaround is not simply a financial exercise, it is a cultural one. The financial metrics follow the cultural change. You cannot improve the numbers without first changing how people think about their work. The circular saw was not primarily a manufacturing tool. It was a piece of theater, carefully staged to communicate a message that no memo or presentation could have delivered with the same clarity. The old way is over. Not gradually over. Over now. The man in charge is cutting it down with his own hands. The Boxster deserves more credit in this story than it usually receives. The 911 is the romantic narrative. The car that was almost cancelled. The car that survived. The car that became the most enduring sports car in production history. But the Boxster was the financial lifeline. It sold to buyers who wanted Porsche but couldn't stretch to the 911's price. It generated the volume and the margin that gave the 911 room to be refined and developed without constantly having to justify itself against the quarterly numbers. The Boxster was the practical decision. The 911 was the emotional one. The company needed both. The Cayenne, which came later, completed the picture. A Porsche SUV was controversial, deeply, loudly controversial among the enthusiast community. People who cared about what Porsche represented argued that an SUV was a betrayal, a capitulation, a corruption of the brand's identity. Wiedeking's view, which he expressed publicly and directly, was that a profitable Porsche making SUVs was a better custodian of the 911 than a bankrupt Porsche making nothing at all. The Cayenne generated revenue that funded the development of every sports car that followed it. The 997, the 981, the 991, the 992, all of them were subsidized, in part, by the SUV that everyone said Porsche shouldn't build. That is the practical reality of the turnaround. It was not a triumph of purity. It was a triumph of survival, achieved through a combination of manufacturing discipline, strategic clarity, and the willingness to make decisions that would be unpopular but necessary. The 911 today is not identical to the 911 of 1993. It is water-cooled where it was air-cooled. It has electronic assistance where it had none. It has grown in weight, in size, and in sophistication. But it is still a rear-engine sports car built in Zuffenhausen, still carrying the identity that the company nearly lost. That it exists at all is the consequence of a phone call, a set of Japanese consultants, and a man in a factory jumpsuit with a circular saw. That is what a real turnaround looks like. Not a strategy presentation, not a brand repositioning. A CEO in workwear, physically dismantling the way things had always been done, because the alternative was watching everything disappear. Subscribe for the full story, every time. Not the version that gets told at launches and in press releases. Like the video, share it with someone, and leave a comment below. We always like to hear from you.